This is Adventurer for Life. I'm Joel, and today we're going to do a review of the mechanical aspects of the Grenadier and their performance after my 15,000 mile plus across the United States and across Canada trip. So we're going to start with the good. First of all, the car was just absolutely, from a mechanical standpoint, rock solid. I drove this car hard. Drove up, again to Alaska, from Fairbanks from Dead Horse, Alaska, driving across Canada. There are some rough roads and unpaved sections, and some of the paved sections honestly were worst. I drove this thing hard and it was rock solid. Let's talk about the engine. The accelerations is good. I floored it a bunch of times to pass people. Most of the reviews I've seen rate the Grenadier very well from an acceleration standpoint. Honestly, again, I've said before, I'm an aggressive driver. I want more. And I'm gratified to find out that there's a company called Agile Off-Road in California that's got a tuner that supposedly adds 50 horsepower, and it's my plan to do that at some point, and when I do, I will let you know. The transmission, boy, fantastic. It was smooth. The manual shifting is great. The auto upshifts, when the RPMs exceed 5,200 RPMs, I wasn't a big fan of that, but I understand why they do it, for to protect the engine and protect the transmission. So they really did a superior job on the transmission. And then this is an interior thing. Not a fan of the shift knob, but the transmission itself was just fabulous. As far as suspension goes, very comfortable. Handles bumps extremely well. And then when you're going around corners, even corners, at a relatively high rate of speed, there's just very little body roll on this car. And so most cars that are this big, 6,000 pounds or whatever, when you go around a corner, you're going to get some body roll, but this really does not roll much at all. Braking. The braking is good, and I was in multiple, quote unquote emergency situations. A couple of those, you're driving down the road and something happens in front of you that's unanticipated, and you have to hit the brakes hard, and you're not really sure if you're going to stop before you hit the car in front of you. And I had that a couple of times, and I got stopped and was impressed with the braking again on especially with it being such a heavy vehicle. The steering, lots of comments before these were being delivered about the steering not righting itself or correcting itself when you're coming out of a turn and that kind of thing, and that it requiring too many inputs. The steering, I would say it's breaking in. It is getting better. It got better during this trip, so you don't have to correct the steering when you're coming out of a 90-degree turn or more as much as you did when the car was brand new, so it's definitely breaking in. Let's talk about alignment. I had them check the alignment at the 24,000 mile service point, and it was still within spec. Now, they did adjust it a little bit, but the alignment was still within spec. And again, I went through some potholes and some bumps and some rocks and whatnot at speed, and I thought for sure, that's why I had them check the alignment, because I thought for sure the alignment would get knocked out, but it was still in alignment. So that tells you that the underpinnings of the suspension are very tough. You can argue whether this is a mechanical thing or not, but the cruise control operates very well. Initially, when you first set it, it kind of searches for the speed. So if you hit the cruise control button and you're going 70 miles an hour and you set it for 70, it'll drop down to 69 or 68 and then kind of creep back up a couple of degrees before it settles in. So that's not as good as it could be. And there's also, when you are, you know, if you've got the cruise set on 70 and you decide you're going to accelerate, when you hit the gas pedal, there's a delay. There's a noticeable delay when you hit the gas pedal and the cruise is on, between when you hit the gas pedal and when it actually starts accelerating. And then finally, the dealer service and support, you know, just excellent from Regal, excellent from Warner, Ineos in Salt Lake City. So very happy with the support I've received so far. How about the not so good? You know, and some of these things, again, are in both categories. The engine, you know, would like to have more power, and you know, I'm planning on towing a trailer with this thing. And if I don't have quite enough power without a trailer, it's probably not going to be real great with a trailer. Steering does still require more driver input than you'd like to give, and the turning radius, as you've heard, is, I hate to use the word poor, it's just noticeably insufficient in multiple situations where you're having to, you know, back up and go forward multiple times to get in a parking spot or whatever. The transfer case, there's a rubber, I'm going to call it shock absorber, that cracked, that's supposedly going to get replaced under warranty, and I'll talk to you about that after it's done. Their rear differential seal is leaking. I don't know if I can get the camera down there to show it, but if you can see the rear differential there, it is leaking. I think there's a seal right in front of it where maybe the drive shaft hooks into the differential, and it's leaking, and that's supposedly going to get corrected on warranty also, and I'll let you know more about that. The fuel tank and the miles per gallon are just inadequate. Now, I'm not so concerned about the miles per gallon, except, you know, from a cost standpoint, but from a range standpoint, you know, it either needs better gas mileage or a bigger gas tank. And so I'm hoping that someone develops an auxiliary gas tank. There's a company in Colorado outside of Denver, I think, called Couch Engineering, that does work on Unimogs, and they're doing some development work on some aftermarket things for the Grenadier, and they've intimated or hinted that they're going to do an auxiliary gas tank, and I certainly hope they do. Okay, let's talk about the fuel gauge. And again, this may not be exactly mechanical, but it's related to mechanical things. So the fuel gauge is inaccurate in two ways. One, it doesn't give you the correct amount of gas that's still in the tank. When you get down to it showing absolute 0 miles left, there's still about 2 gallons of gas left in the gas tank, and maybe that's just them, you know, trying to give you some safety built in or whatever, but they ought to tell you exactly what it is. And then on top of that, if you look at the miles per gallon calculator on the computer screen, it's showing about 2 miles per gallon more than you're actually getting, and I tested that on multiple occasions, and it's that's the way it is. Next thing, the tire pressure sensor is oversensitive for both low and high. So I think this thing's supposed to be somewhere between, the tires are supposed to be somewhere, but probably between 31 and 37 pounds of pressure. Again, that's something that Ineos lowered from the factory. It showed 49 for the rear and 43 for the front. Now I think they've gone to 37 all the way around. You know, the tire pressure, you drive down the road and it's a little bit hot and it gets up to 38, 39 pounds of pressure, and you start getting this indicator on the screen. And, you know, it's irritating. And then if you happen to drive from a hot area to a cooler area, I mean, it actually could cool down to the point where in the same day, the tire pressure management system could be telling you that the tires have too much pressure, and without changing anything later, have too little pressure. So they've got it set a little too tight on the tire pressure management system. The check engine light came on due to overfilling or no, not overfilling, just filling the gas tank. So I never, on new vehicles, I never top off the gas tank. I stick the nozzle in there, I turn it on, and when it clicks off the first time, I stop. Well, apparently there's a known issue that fortunately did not occur until I was done with my trip. In fact, I was driving to Atlanta to get the service done at Regal for the 24,000 mile oil change and whatnot. And I filled up with gas and the check engine light came on. Well, that's a little irritating. Lots of people have to deal with check engine lights coming on, but one of the things that Ineos did in their programming was, if the check engine light comes on, guess what? They turn off the cruise control. Well, so they fixed it. They didn't fix it, they just turned off the check engine light. Well, I went on another long trip, a 3,000 mile trip, since I got back from the 15,000 mile trip, and sure enough, about halfway through, the check engine light came on again and the cruise control kit's working. So I'm thinking, oh my goodness. Well, I happened to go, I stayed in a particular place. It was a vacation for a couple of weeks and was dreading the trip back, all the way back without a cruise control. And probably the 5th or 6th time I put gas in the vehicle, it turned the check engine light off and the cruise control worked the rest of the way back. Supposedly, again, Ineos is aware of this and they've got a fix for it. And then the last thing is, and I don't like to complain about pricing, and I'm not really complaining about pricing, I'm just letting you know that the dealer, the charges from the dealers are pretty high. I think I told you at Warner, who I was very happy with, I think they were charging $210 an hour, and honestly, I'm not sure exactly what Regal is charging. I think it's a little bit less than that, because they charged me less to install the second windshield, which I'll talk more about later. But anyway, it is high. Not surprised by that or whatnot, but you certainly need to be aware that you're going to be spending more than you would for most vehicles. So anyway, that is the mechanical review after driving this thing 17,000 miles. Well, actually, I'm at 28,000 miles now, but those are the things that really jumped out at me after this 17,000 mile trip that I did. All right, next week we're gonna do a review of the exterior aspects of the Grenadier. See you then.